All right, guys, we are going to move into our next topic, which we are keeping with the subject that's near and dear to my heart and my professional interest, and that's marketing. Ivy did a great job of speaking to how we display our messaging and get prospective students interested in our products. But we have that's just the beginning. There's a lot more work that needs to be done once we have made that first point of contact with our prospective students. So please join me in welcoming Sarah Hamilton to the podium to talk about lead nurturing in higher education.
Thanks, guys. So what I'm going to talk about is not so much the future after lead nurturing, but our future here in how we nurture our leads. So we're going to talk a bit about what lead nurturing is. I know this is new for a lot of people and how we talk about nurturing our leads and what I specifically mean when I talk about lead nurturing here and why we need it. Next, how we do it. So what are those next steps and how could you do it for your own school, for those of you streaming? And then we'll leave some time for the Q&A. So let's start by what is lead nurturing? And just to throw in some marketing, we always know that GIFs and dogs perform really well all the time. So we're going to combine them and use them throughout. So to start us off, we have the definition of lead nurturing, which is the purposeful process of engaging a defined target group by providing relevant information at each stage of the buyer's journey, positioning your company as the best and safest choice to enable them to achieve their objectives. So I'm going to translate that a bit. So that means we want to give each of our leads the right content for them at the right time through a series of emails to make sure that we position our college as the best choice and the only choice for them when it comes to deciding where to go. Now, this is one tool in a series of many tools that our marketing team deploys. So what we're looking at here is a big series of tools that help us through the buyer's journey to bring a stranger all the way through to a promoter of our school. So each person that enrolls at UNE Online that then graduates go through this series of stages. They start as a stranger, not knowing who we are as a school. Then they visit our website. Hopefully they see one of our ads. They've searched for a keyword either organically through the work that our content managers do or through Ivy's work with paid SEO. Maybe it's through social media, following our channel, seeing some boosted posts, and then they visit our website. There, they're able to click on some content, they can download, they fill out forms, they visit our landing pages, just like you learned about in our last presentation, and they become a lead. Now here's where lead nurturing really picks up. This is where we use a series of emails and series of more content to really help make them a true believer in what we offer and make sure that decision is kind of not really a decision when it comes to deciding to join UNE's group of amazing students. Once they do that, they become, in our system, a student, or you'll see here, just in marketing terms, a customer. And once we do that, we engage them through other promotional or marketing efforts like our ambassador program or events that we often put on to become promoters and want to share UNE as an awesome choice for their colleagues or to come back for additional programs later on in their career. So, why do we need lead nurturing? Well, it's a really crowded marketplace. Like we've heard over the last day and a half, when we first started, it was a pretty open field and we had a ton of success. Over the last 5-6 years, the marketplace has gotten really crowded and we need to grab our audience's attention. Students are doing tons of research on their own, so it's really important that they make an informed decision and we help them make an informed decision by providing them with the content they need to make that choice. And by putting that relevant content out there, we're able to build our reputation, build our credibility, and stay top of mind as they evaluate their options of where to go to get that next degree or to take that next non-matriculated course. And by putting the right content in front of our leads at the right time, we eliminate their need to search for additional information and eliminate their need to seek information from additional competitors that they might not have thought of or might not have seen before that would then become a player in the mix that doesn't need to be. So how do we do this? There's a variety of steps when it comes to executing a lead nurturing campaign. The first is defining our buyer persona. So who are we trying to reach? We need to really understand our audience. We want to consider their demographics, their psychographics, so what's valuable to them, what's really important when it comes to making that decision. What are they searching for? So what keywords are they searching for that we can really hone in on and create content around to make sure that what we create doesn't just sit somewhere on the internet never to be found, but surfaces to allow us to really start this process of nurturing them. And where do they get that information? So even if they're not searching, where do they consume information? Do they consume it on social media? Do we get our posts up there? Do they Google a lot? Everyone Googles a lot, so that's important. Do they, have certain publications that they really look at? Maybe an MPH student has a ton of interest in hospitals, and they really look at what's going on in different hospitals in their area, and we want to make sure that we're providing relevant content in those arenas. So that's really important to understand when it comes to aligning with the right placements and aligning with the right content and outlets. The next step is identifying the content we want to create. So based on the content our audience is searching for and that tons of keyword research that we do, we want to start planning out the content we need to create to engage each audience at each stage of the buyer's journey. So we don't just create one piece, but we create multiple pieces to nurture them throughout their buyer's journey. So this includes creating and planning blogs to get the content out there, social posts to promote it, and any additional supporting content needed to distribute that. That might be ads for those different placements that we talked about based on where they're consuming media. And then lastly, we build out our nurturing pathway. So in our case, our UNE Online's instance, we would use Engagement Studio, which is part of Pardot, to build out our system. They convert on different pieces of content. They'll enter the Engagement Studio at different phases, and then they'll be able to be led through a series of emails towards that next piece of content to help them eventually work with an enrollment counselor and fill out their application. All right, the lead nurturing pathway, another big series of steps, so bear with me. This is a series of 4 steps as we convert somebody again from a stranger to a student here. So the first is educate. So when we educate our students here or our leads here, it's the very beginning where we're focusing on educating our customers and delivering a commercial teaching point of view. So this is not about our school. This is about something really broad that we want our leads to focus on and where we're going to position ourselves as a thought leader. Then we're going to inform our students a little bit more, inform our leads. We're going to teach them how to make a better decision and advance their process of figuring out what school to attend for their next degree. Followed by the engagement phase. This is where we're going to share even more relevant content, and gain the engagement of our prospects to begin that conversation. We really start focusing on our program, our school, and why they need to work with us. And then lastly, this is where we convert them from a lead to a student and really show them how they can start working with us to fill out that application and become one of our students. So we start building content that resonates. So during the educate phase, we work on content that educates and is not focused again on our own program or school, but rather the topic that our lead is searching for. So that initial piece that they might have been searching for on Google or may have scrolled by and saw on Facebook. This examples would include ebooks on careers for social workers. So again, broad topics. Maybe a guide to being an online student because they're looking at online programs, but they don't know what it means to be an online student. And it's kind of an intimidating topic if they've only been to on-campus undergraduate programs. Or tips, a collection of tips for starting or searching for a graduate program. Maybe they don't know what's important to consider when it comes to evaluating different graduate programs, and we can be that resource to help them. Then we shift to inform. This helps our leads, again, make better decisions, moving them closer to the decision-making process, and helps them think of our institute as reliable and trustworthy and a thought leader. So again, it's still not about UNE Online, but it's positioning us as a reliable and trustworthy player in the space. So examples here would be an ebook, maybe the impact a graduate degree has on the next generation of educators, infographics on what a health informatics degree could mean for your career, or white papers, so research papers that EDD educators have done for their communities. And now we get a little bit further and we really start to go in and go for the kill. So we engage our students, our leads to become students, and introduce UNE Online as their engagement choice. And we really want to work on prospecting these leads to really becoming students here. So examples would be maybe a comparison document between our program and another, highlighting why our program would be the wise choice for them. Case studies focused on graduate students and their successes and why they really succeeded on our program. Testimonials, collections of firsthand positive experience from our students, or a collection of FAQs from students. So really as they start to get into the application process, questions they might have as they start to consider UNE Online as their true choice. And lastly, this is where the hard sell comes in, and we start to talk about how they engage with us for the application process. So speak with an enrollment counselor, apply now, waive your application with this code. These are the moves that we make to really get them to apply now, here or never. Now, what else do we need? That's a lot of content that we just covered needing, but that's not it. So we need blog posts. We create these pieces of content, but we need places for it to live so that people can access it and download it. So for every piece of content we create, we need 3 to 4 blog posts in order for people to find it and download it. What's important is that these blog posts have different keywords that people could be searching for. So we do even more keyword research and find out different topics that people could be searching for so that they could find those blog posts, read them, and then find that piece of content. So we're really amplifying that blogging strategy and that search strategy to find multiple keywords people could be searching for to get that one downloadable and get them started, enrolled in that lead nurturing process. Same with social media. We want to make sure that this lives and breathes as much as possible in our space, especially as an online college. This is an awesome place for people to engage with us. Now, we don't just share it once. On Facebook, we can share it up to 4 times in a month, and it doesn't get stale, especially as we share more and more content on there. Twitter is time-based. So if somebody misses it and they're not spending a ton of time on Twitter, they're unlikely to see it again. So we can post it up to 10 times a week, and somebody might only see it once, if they even see it, because Twitter is so crowded depending on the number of followers you have or who you're following. And calls to action. These calls to action are the buttons you click to download those pieces of content, need to live everywhere and on multiple places on a page. So those blog posts will have 2 to 3 opportunities for somebody to click on it. And they'll have multiple variations. So they might be different colors, they might have different languages, or they might say different download versions. It might say download, click here to view this brochure and see what resonates with our audience. So when it comes together, it looks a little bit something like this. Now, this shows why Ian has a job. I am not a graphic designer. Up here, we start with those CTAs. So those yellow buttons or those yellow suns is where somebody would really start that first process. So we see that somebody could fill out a CTA or click on a CTA, and they would be directed, no matter where that CTA lived, to a form. And they would fill out that form and start that lead nurturing process. Now, what's very cool about technology is that no matter what piece of content they were interested in, whether it was that very first piece of content that was very high level about becoming an online student, all the way to a comparison document between UNE Online and our competitors based on where they are in their decision-making process, they can enroll in our lead nurturing process and get picked up, and we can start to send them those follow-up emails to move them towards that application push. So we can have that set up for anybody no matter where they are in their decision-making process. They can also jump between that, which is really exciting and very cool. So if somebody was moving along their process very quickly and they went from that first phase to that third phase, our technology now can skip that second column altogether and keep moving them along. And now here's just a little bit closer up look so we can see what those emails look like. So if we have that first piece of content, we see, did they open it? Yes or no? Yes, we move them to that next piece of content. We want to make sure that they're moving and getting relevant pieces of content to them. We're not giving them anything stale. We're not sending them the same offer over and over again, but we're moving them to that next piece that will help make sure they know that we are relevant and timely and up to date with our technology. If they don't open it, we're going to send them reminders for that next piece. Okay, so we saw that maybe you got our email, but you didn't get a chance to check out this new checklist on how to fill out your online application. Here it is again. We want to make sure that you get this checklist before the application deadline approaches. Let us know if you have any questions. And we'll repeat that process till we make sure that they get that right piece of content for them. So what happens next? So once a student has completed the lead nurturing cycle, there's two paths they can take. The first one is that they've converted into an applicant and they're working with our enrollment team. And the second is that they didn't convert and marketing would work to enroll them into a long-term drip campaign that would help keep them engaged until they're ready to work with us again. Now it's important to note that that might mean they're never going to work with us again. They may have enrolled in another program, or they may have decided that school's not for them, or they don't need a degree after all. There are always going to be those students that it's not a perfect fit. And then lastly, we analyze. So another important step to this is never letting us get into the habit of setting and forgetting it. So each piece of this has the opportunity to review and make sure that we are looking at opportunities to make it better. So when we look at the emails that we're sending, here are some just quick factors we can look at. Do we have a high open rate with a low click-through rate? That might mean that the content piece that we're offering or the CTA that we're showing isn't really enticing for these students, and we might want to see if there's something else that we can offer them. If there's a low open rate and a low click-through rate, that might mean our subject line for the email isn't resonating with our students, and once they do open it, the content isn't really resonating either. Let's rethink that step in the lead nurturing process. High unsubscribe rates. That first piece of content might have been something really cool, but not relevant to actually getting students, and they're not interested in our programs overall. Low open rates with a high click-through rate. Our subject line wasn't really enticing, but the content that we're offering is awesome, and the people that really opened it were super excited. Let's try some new headlines or subject lines. And then lastly, the gold standard would be a high open rate and a high click-through rate. Super exciting to see. Let's model what we did here and see if we can get that across some other emails and some other opportunities. We also want to look and see what social posts and blogs are performing well. What did people search for in our blogs? What resonated well with this audience? And what CTAs on that blog clicked well? Was there a certain CTA in terms of placement that clicked well? Was the CTA that was higher up performing better than lower down on the page? Was the orange CTA performing better than the blue? Was the one that said click here doing better than download? What opportunities there can we look at to see what performed better? Same with social posts. What kind of content performed better? The social post that went to the blog that then went to the offer, or the one that just went to the offer? Let's look and see what did better. And then lastly, we want to gather feedback from our enrollment and sales team to hear about the leads that have come through, to see if they're relevant, to see if they're excited, and to see if they're good prospects. All right, I think we've got a few minutes left for questions.
Can you talk a little bit about how you're applying all of this now? So, you know, what program are you working with? Who else is part of it? So obviously this is really helpful and useful, but thinking about what the next steps are for us internally.
Absolutely. So this is a pretty big project, I'm sure. I hope I kind of made that clear, but we are starting off with health informatics. So we are piloting this initial launch with health informatics. So we have a few stakeholders really starting in on the process, and we're developing buyer personas next. So that is our next stage. We're getting together with, we have enrollment, we have marketing, we have research and strategy, we have program, all sitting in the room. I may have forgotten somebody. I apologize if I have. All sitting in the room to talk about what we look for in an ideal student, who's done really well, from research and strategy to talk about the demographics. So to get anecdotal information as well as hard research to really perform and meld together to build out those buyer personas so that we can start that process of identifying the content and where to start to think about placement for that content. And Allison as well, our content manager, has started keyword research for this program as in the background, so that once we have those buyer personas, we can start to overlay the opportunities we found there with keywords that we're finding in the back, not to lose any time. But we are hoping to have this process rolled out for health informatics in February. So all of that content and enrollment or engagement studio built out for February.
Hi, yes. You mentioned in your analysis phase that you are looking and seeing how the models for how you're reaching out to and grooming these leads, how you can make that work more efficiently, how you can fix the weak links in the chain. And it occurred to me that you're working on different ways of marketing what exists in the program or the programs. And I was curious about instances where the feedback that you're getting may speak to the actual content within the program, such as, the program could emphasize or offer something like this or something like that, or do this thing differently, and is that the case? Sometimes does the analysis show that the program and those of us who are working on the product that we're actually selling here could be done in a different way? And if so, how is that collected?
So since this is new and we haven't rolled it out yet, I don't have the perfect anecdote to share, but I do think in the future as we look into it, one thing that I'm thinking of is if we see a piece of content about one area of expertise, or if we're looking at things like focus areas that are resonating really well, or we see a lot of engagement around, that if we worked with instructional design and if we work with the programs, that we could see develop into something long-term for building out some of our courses in the directions of that based on what people are looking for and engaging with in our marketing content. Absolutely. I think that would be a really wonderful way to do a full loop there, or close a loop there. Did I answer that? Okay.
Hi. So I just had another question sort of off of what Elena had asked, but in regards to buyer personas, how many, do you have sort of a range that you're thinking of about how many buyer personas you're going to build out for each particular program, or when you're building out the engagement studio?
Yeah, that's a wonderful question. So buyer personas can be a little bit tricky because you can go in there and you can create as many as you could possibly think of, and think of small nuances that can differentiate them. But I think it's important to keep in mind and try to keep it down to 2 or 3 when you're developing those buyer personas, because if you have too many, you're going to create so many different opportunities for being unable to track what does well and miss out on those bigger pictures of overlap and what really is the core of what drives these different personas and developing that kind of content and developing those pathways. One area that is very cool about buyer personas, though, is developing a negative persona. So not only can you develop 2 or 3 buyer personas of the people you want to reach, but you can build out the persona of that person that you don't want to reach, that might come through the funnel quite often, or might come through every once in a while that you don't want to spend too much time on because they often aren't the right fit or rarely are the right fit, and you want to make sure that you are not spending too much time or creating efforts that would attract that person. So that's a cool addition that you can do during that process.
Hello.
Hi.
I've got a question for you.
Sure.
And this might be a little bit of a loaded question, but I'm going to switch gears and ask you about content in particular. I think, in higher education and here in particular, you've got a lot of folks that are constantly, producing content in different ways. We have our own assets that we're building for our products, it's our intellectual property, et cetera, et cetera. I'm wondering if you can just kind of speak to how the content that you're talking about in a marketing aspect may be, in some cases, very different than the content or the verbiage that someone on the product side might use. Does that make sense? The question makes sense?
Yes, absolutely. That's another really good question. So I think what's really important when we're thinking about marketing and the content that we're creating is that it's not about our program necessarily most of the time. A lot of times it's about the industry and it's about programs in general like ours. So we want to talk to people about what they value in our programs and speak to them more generally. When we get to things like the courses we offer, that's where we get really specific about our programs. But what's really great about marketing content is that we can talk to our personas and we can be a little bit more broad and really focus on those values and not focus too much on making sure that we are wording things in a very specific way, because we're trying to get to them at a certain level in their decision-making process that is a little bit higher up. So it's not that educational level, it's not that textbook level, but it's that almost conversational level, like come to us because we can talk to you about what we are offering. And it's that friendly tone that we're gonna welcome you into our community in our school. I think that's it. So thank you guys.